My name's Dave Butler. I'm CEO of the UKAA. We're hosting today's webinar, which is being run by our friends from Love to Rent. And it's a really interesting and challenging title, Covid-19 Coming Back Stronger After the Event. We're going to start off with Peter Sloane from Love to Rent, speaking about a few key things about the opportunity, how we come back, what the opportunities are. And then we'll pass to each of our panelists to give their views on Peter's hopefully slightly provocative comments, and then we'll take a debate from there. So, Peter, if you can just introduce yourself.
Hi, thanks, David. Yes, Peter Sloane. I chair Love to Rent. My history in the business has been like 35 years in residential development, sales and marketing, the number of corporate companies, and I'm now consulting on my own.
Okay, Sarah, perhaps you can introduce yourself.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Sarah Quinn. I'm the head of operations for Moda Living. I've been with Moda for just over 2 years now. I have a background in both student accommodation and the BTR market.
Okay, and Lizzie?
Morning, everyone. My name is Lizzie. I am the director of Folio London, which is the build to rent PRS investment arm of Notting Hill Genesis, which some of you may know as being one of the biggest housing associations in the country. We oversee about 66,000 homes, I think it is. But part of Folio, there is just over 3,000 homes that we hold as investment, and we let and manage our portfolio on behalf of Notting Hill Genesis.
Okay, and then Will in the corner there.
Good morning, all. I'm Will Waller. I'm a director at Arcadis and build to rent market leader for Arcadis. We're a multidisciplinary consultancy, and we're working with a variety of clients across build to rent, later living and student accommodation across the UK and Ireland.
And finally, Sophie.
Hi everyone, I'm Sophie. I'm also from Folio, and I'm the marketing manager. So I'll be talking everything marketing and strategies and pretty stuff.
Absolutely. There's someone said we can only see the person who's talking whilst on the screen, not as a grid. I think if you click on the top right-hand side of your Zoom box, you'll see an option which says speaker view or grid view. So I think if you click on that, that should solve the problem. But anyway, let's go back to Peter. And Peter, if you could give us a sense of your ideas, the key themes we should be thinking about to come back stronger post-COVID-19.
Thanks, Dave. Yes. Well, where are we? We're in pestilence of biblical proportions, without doubt. The most traumatic event to hit certainly our generation, and since the Second World War. And interesting to see, I think today is the day that is VE Day, 75 years ago, which we're commemorating. So we've been struck by that, and initially, of course, the human characteristic response has, in our industry, seen a deluge of research reports coming in daily. I've had 3 on my desk already, and the what ifs, buts and maybes and numbers and statistics are quite staggering that's coming through. And this really responds to the human request and desire to know where we are and what might happen, because we've been struck so badly. At Love to Rent, which I chair, we stepped back from that and we tried to ask ourselves some questions about what life might be like post COVID-19. When we asked the questions, we were in the middle of lockdown, and the hospital beds were taken up with COVID patients at an alarming rate. So we were trying to ask that question. And what did become quite clear is there seemed to be, when we asked those questions, the answers brought a convergence in a shift of key influences in the business that suggests maybe that the build to rent market will hit a sweet spot, maybe not quite a nirvana, but there will be a move towards more interest across a load of areas in the build to rent market. So we spoke to Dave and the guys at UKAA, and they invited us to share those thoughts in the webinar audience, and also ask other expert panelists who are with me today to do a webinar to members. So we had 5 key areas, and in order of no importance whatsoever, we looked at residential sales. And of course, residential sales are under an enormous pressure. Mortgages, loan to values on mortgages have dropped from the required 85 to 90 odd percent down to 60 to 70%. That seemed to come in even before we had lockdown from the lenders. Valuers must be finding it very difficult to nail valuations with such little market activity. And when we come out of, when we now know we will be unlocked, probably in stages, job and income uncertainty will be predominant. We seem to be predominant. So I really can't see, we can't really see people looking immediately to take on large mortgage debt. So we suggest there'll be a restrictive sales market for some time. And you do ask the question that, given the average income disparity with average price, especially around London, will post-COVID finally see us uncouple from the ownership obsession that has dominated post-war living? Don't know, these are questions, and they are questions that we welcome challenges to. There was a question about commercial market. Well, we asked questions about commercial funding. The wealth and pension investment funds have typically poured bucket loads of money into retail parks and shopping centres. Easily, they are going to be one of the hardest hit sectors coming out of COVID-19. We see horror stories about high street shopping. So you say to yourself, well, if there's clearly still going to be very large amounts of money looking for homes in the property market and the build to rent market, it must be an obvious option. There are clearly some fiduciary challenges around where pension funds can invest money, and maybe we'll revisit the old argument about, is it time for a specific user class for build to rent? I'll leave that little nugget there for a discussion, perhaps later. We then looked at resident demand. What demand is likely coming out of unlock? What is it likely to be? And Love to Rent has noticed already a 40% increase in registrations on the website. And that, to my mind, is pretty obvious. We are now some 5 weeks into lockdown, and there must be some considerable strains within those homes and households, with people absolutely desperate to fly out and find somewhere else to live as soon as they can. And the build to rent product in that context will be a very welcome place to go to. It's one that embraces and encourages community activity, and through a lot of the people, some of the people who are here today and the co-panelists, Sarah at Moda, for example, Moda do an awful lot of community engagement, and this community engagement from residents comes up time and again in some of the webinars I've seen and reports you read. It's a very positive attitude, and I think perhaps that people will look more at the build to rent market as a place to live. So the build to rent appeal extends across with the work from home culture that we have been forced into during the lockdown. This has catapulted the digital age into a field that we just hadn't seen 4 weeks ago. The environment that we're communicating in now is pretty alien to us 4 weeks ago. Maybe boardrooms had conversations and video conferencing like this, but not as mainstream. And you just feel as though as we unlock in stages, there will be still an awful lot of people working from home as an environment, and the build to rent market has facilities within its design that allow for that. it is almost the facilities management is in the build to rent DNA. So I feel as though that we could capture an awful lot of that. And I know Lizzie and Sophie might be talking a little bit more about that later on. And then finally, I think the build to rent buildings themselves. Any lessons learnt there? During our time of lockdown and isolation, what lessons are being learned as we come out, and will the buildings change substantially in response to that? We know that there's challenges, and for Arcades will talk about the changes and challenges within that arena. We've already seen, and there's a lot of reports coming up about already the growth in suburban build to rent. It's interesting that seems to have been a 12% growth on last year in development planning and completed homes. And build to rent has expanded out. It's gone out of just the city centre. It's not just city centre, high rise, high density. Homes for families are now an important area. It seems as though lessons have been quickly learned. I think the next UKAA webinar is hosted by the educated body guys who look at pools and gyms and the community arenas, community areas of the buildings. So that's interesting. And I think that the public do see the build to rent model in a positive light. And Love to Rent is the first and still the only search portal with a community area to it that responds to the build to rent DNA and everything that it looks to promote. So I do think with those and other forces, we've got a very bright future, and that is my little bit, Dave.
Must remember to unmute myself. Okay, Peter, thank you. That's a pretty comprehensive overview of some of the things that are going on in the marketplace. And our panelists, I know that will have lots of things to say on that. And a few things I could maybe say at the end. But first of all, Sarah, can I turn to you to pick up on the issue of community? Peter's talked about it, and there's been a lot of general comments that community is really important. But there are some practicalities behind it. We've had a question in from Matt asking about how, if community facilities are so important, if community is so important and facilities are a key part of that, how do we square that with all the social distancing things? Perhaps you could talk about what you're doing at MODA and how the existence or lack of existence of facilities under current circumstances is changing that sense of community. Mm-hmm.
Good morning, everyone. I think that sort of touching on some of Peter's initial points is quite important. I think fundamentally, whilst we are in a very exceptional period of time at the moment, everybody ultimately needs somewhere to live. It doesn't matter who you are, what you are, you will need a home of some proportion. And whatever happens coming out of COVID-19, there will still be people looking for homes. And I think that's a very important point to make. I think renters, like buyers, we've pressed a pause button on that market at the moment, but they are canny individuals and they are researching the market. They're looking at what their pound will buy them, and they are researching sort of from the perspective of what will enhance their life, what will give them the value for money that they're probably seeking at this particular stage in life, what will really add value to their experience. Now, we at MODA have looked at community as a real opportunity, and believe that the community model for MODA is the right road to go down. And back in the day when we were looking at what our platform should look like, we invested quite a considerable amount of time into looking at providing our residents with an app and we call it very intuitively the My Moda app. And all residents have access to this. Now, what they use the app for is basically to communicate with our concierge team, with our wider team, but also ultimately to communicate internally. So instead of going to, like when you stay in a hotel and you pick up the phone and you dial each room to room, you can do that through our app and you can communicate in that sort of respect. So what the app has allowed us to do is actually to build a communication forum, specifically COVID related, where individuals can share their concerns, even though they can't sort of mingle and socialize. They can share concerns, they can share sort of worries, they can also share the positives of the experience, they can also share any sort of new and updated information that may be relevant to the wider community. And this is proving to be quite relevant, and is proving to be sort of taken up by all our residents who believe that, you know, whilst they're sort of locked away in their apartment, they can still communicate with their fellow neighbours. So that's been a massive, massive positive. In terms of obviously amenities and actual resident engagement, there's been a creative shift to look at our resident engagement offer by switching it into the virtual world. And I know a lot of our sort of BTR operators have done a similar proposal. We have sort of teamed up with key businesses within this area. Our health and wellbeing partner, Hero Wellbeing, are facilitating both not only the gym classes online, they're also doing nutrition sessions, they're also doing, very, very importantly, mental health wellbeing sessions as well, to ensure that obviously residents are feeling the full force of what wellbeing in its entirety should look like. And this is working really well. We're getting very positive feedback from our residents in what that looks like. And we've seen as well a gradual incline in terms of participants in these virtual sessions, because I think everybody would concur that at the beginning, virtual and doing classes virtually and sort of webinars and all the new technology that we're utilizing was quite a new sort of concept. And we're seeing that these concepts are now being acknowledged as the norm, and people are embracing this, and that's showing in our stats in terms of what people are engaging in. So we've done things that have been covered obviously in social and the press. Our marketing team have worked with Property Week, and we've done things like sessions in the courtyard, balcony workouts, you know, DJ beats in the courtyard, just basically trying to get our residents to communicate and engage in a very different but dynamic way. We've also incorporated a lot of the hospitality messages within our resident engagement, surprise and delight. So Netflix, you know, giving everybody access to a free Netflix night, delivering sort of, you know, popcorn and beer for a movie night, things like that have been taken very, very well by our residents, and they really appreciate it. And we're getting a lot of positive feedback from customers, you know, sending us updates and sending us, you know, thank yous to say, you know, this is a really sort of nice touch that you're providing for us. And we've seen a lot of good messages in that respect. Now, we've obviously switched our resident engagement to virtual because of the amenities that we provide within our buildings have been effectively closed down, and we're not able to offer the gym, and we're not able to offer the co-working spaces that we have previously been offering tenants. But this is, I think, something that most operators are having to sort of look at for, you know, social distancing purposes. It's a huge sort of weight to sort of have on one's shoulders, you know, the prospect of having individuals within these areas and, you know, having sort of social distancing as a factor in sort of our amenity area and not being able to police that effectively. I don't think anyone would want that sort of responsibility on their shoulders. So I think from an individual perspective, a lot of people now, when they're researching their next home, will be looking at the quality of internet provision within their buildings, and internet will become a real sort of positive element of delivery for BTR providers. If that network is good, then we can definitely tick that box in many, many respects. I think that there will be a lot of people searching for the option to have the work from home opportunity going forward. I think that the accommodation that we offer delivers that. And I think that obviously businesses, local businesses, and incorporating local businesses within our framework of resident engagement is also an area where we're keen to sort of maximise our sort of responses on. We want to be seen as local champions. We want to be seen as a kind of city bastions, if you like. We want to be seen as people that embrace our community and our culture, and each city within the UK has a different community outlook and a different culture within that. And I think that's very important. And Moda certainly look at the sort of the location of where we are as a fundamental part of who we are and what we are.
Sarah, thank you. That's a great, some great points there, and I hope we've covered the point about access to community facilities. There's one more question just come in, a quick one, which is the My Moda app being used for access control, e.g. mobile keys yet?
We haven't used our mobile app yet for access as yet, because unfortunately we are waiting for the completeness of the building. So we have to effectively have the complete building handed over before we actually have live electronic keys. So it's coming, and it's coming soon.
Thank you, Sarah. And Lizzie, can I pass to you? Would you like also to comment on the sense of community and how you're creating it within the Folio portfolio, and I see it home with the cat? If you can pick up on that point, but then also I'm interested in Peter's comment that BTR becomes the most attractive investment option. I wonder within the Notting Hill Genesis group how BTR is being seen compared to other investment options at the moment.
Yeah, I can. So there's the point on community. I think Sophie's going to talk about actually after. So I might leave that bit for Sophie, if you don't mind. And I think she's going to talk a bit about kind of what we've been doing in Folio, just to kind of build on that kind of community essence, particularly during this time. In terms of build to rent at Notting Hill Genesis, so it's kind of early days really. I don't have a concrete answer. So the general feeling is that actually the investment is sound, and there's some wiggle room, if you like, either side. But actually in the grand scheme of things in our business as Notting Hill Genesis, we are perhaps one of the most riskier businesses at this particular time. So as in the sort of social and affordable world, many residents receiving, not I'm generalising here, but many residents are already receiving universal credit. They're perhaps already getting kind of government support in terms of income, whereas a lot of our residents are not. So we've seen quite a large impacts in terms of our rent arrears, in terms of our voids, our lettings rates, things like that. So this could well be an opportunity, and we have talked about this at kind of board level, but it could well be an opportunity for us to kind of grow our build to rent portfolio, because there is going to be this sort of focus on living and where you live, I think is going to be sort of more prevalent than ever. But and perhaps looking at kind of different areas. So I think Peter mentioned kind of suburbia earlier, and whether that's sort of a field that we move a bit more into. But then there is the other aspect of it being a big risk. So do we sort of shrink it to some extent? And we haven't quite got those. We haven't quite got those answers yet, but they're definitely two interesting things that we're going to have to consider in the sort of very near future, because ultimately as well there's going to be there's going to be opportunities that I think that come out of this, and I think we need to be sort of you know, clever in our thinking and kind of creative and whatnot. So
yeah, I think I'd echo that. And interesting, we've had a question in asking what we think the impact in the RVs will be. I think that's in a sense the $64,000 question. There is not yet, as I've seen, any evidence in the marketplace of what the actual impact will be. What we do know is that there is money still coming into the build-to-rent market. And Peter made the point very early on that actually, in terms of property classes, build-to-rent is probably one of the safest at the moment. And historically, it's been a very good strategic and defensive asset. For those of you who are interested in that topic, I think it's an area that the UKAA will return to in other forums. We are looking at trying to get regular updates from the major firms' valuers. But at the minute, we haven't seen anything which talks about value. And I don't know if anyone else on the panel has, Sarah, whether you've seen anything on value that you'd want to raise that you can share with us.
Sorry, Dave, just unmuting there. The sort of things that we're sort of obviously seeing is that, you know, in terms of where our portfolio is sitting, we're developing sort of in very regional locations at the moment, and regional continues to be sort of the area where sort of significant investment is going into. I think there's I don't know what the London market necessarily sort of looks like, but it does feel very much that there is a significant shift away from central London and more into sort of suburban and also into the regions as well. And I think that sort of from the value add perspective, I think that adds significant sort of infrastructure challenges to not only public transport, but also the wider economy. And what we will probably see on the back of this is that the BTR market sort of maximizes the actual infrastructure of local cities and communities. BTR can bring very, very significant positives into all of this, and valuations on the back of the locations that we're choosing, I think will only go one way, and that will start to sort of see the increase. There is definitely a demand for more city centre schooling, for example. There will be definitely more demand for city centre healthcare. And these things all need to be taken into consideration when sort of valuers are coming out to sort of look at individual buildings and what that BTR proposition looks like.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. As I say, it is a fascinating question. I think we really will only know the answer to overall valuations on BTR as a class in the next few months. Probably the next. We'll look at what happens in terms of rent coming in May for a quick response to it. Perhaps if I can go back to the theme of community, and Sophie, perhaps you can answer the point the question issues raised by Sarah, and then perhaps talk about how you're adapting your marketing strategies for the new environment.
Yeah, so we've actually been super busy at the moment. There's lots going on. We've had some big changes in our marketing strategies. So predominantly we kind of had more like a hard sell, like reactive kind of approach when it came to marketing. The PRS market and the build to rent market is very fast paced, it's very reactive. And I guess the biggest change we've had recently is where that pace has slowed down slightly. It's being a change from being reactive to proactive and thinking about how we can target people in a more sort of clever approach. And predominantly that comes from digital. My background is all digital marketing, so I'm a big digital marketing fan. And I guess predominantly, like in the past, quite a lot of big providers do sort of focus on direct marketing. That's quite a big sort of campaign that quite a lot of people do. And now, because you can't have your outdoor, you can't have your press and your media, it's sort of like digital now is more important than ever. I think that's really coming to the forefront. So for us, we've just been focusing on all our PPC, our social, our digital, making sure that it's the best it can be. And instead of having this sort of hard sell approach, it's more about brand awareness, and it's more about who we are, what we offer, because that's what people are essentially looking for at the moment. They're not necessarily looking to move tomorrow, but they're looking at for the future. Where do I want to move? Who do I want to like rent with? What kind of things am I looking for? Am I looking for a gym? Am I looking for this? So the demand is definitely there. I think that kind of relates to the point of, even with rental values, we haven't seen our leads drop at all. Like, they've dropped slightly, like a small amount, but the leads are different. Before they were, I want to move next week, what have you got? Now the leads are, okay, so I'm thinking in like June, July, when this all calms down, I want to move and rent with you guys. What have you, like, what different locations have you got? What facilities have what? So it's just a different kind of lead that we're sort of seeing through at the moment. In terms of what we're doing, obviously social and digital is big. We've also looked at doing some direct. So I sort of haven't been I've always been digital, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to try and do a bit of a mixture of a digital and a direct campaign. So whilst everyone is indoors, we've looked at doing some door drops. So we've got a massive campaign going out next week where we're sending out some leaflets saying about what we do as a business and like our properties. And it's a campaign that's better because it's better value for money, because we can target people about 3 miles around our developments. And that's what we found from our market research, is that people want to move at the moment. If they are going to move, it's only going to be in that small margin of 3 miles around where they currently are. So we're targeting like 3 miles around our development, doing a draw drop and having a QR code on it, which is where the digital comes in. And we're having like a QR code that you can scan from your home, and then that automatically picks up the phone to our lettings team. And it just means those discussions can start to be had about where people want to move and rent and stuff. So that's really good. The second thing we've done, so obviously touches a bit on what Sarah said about residents and community and how we've done that. So for us, and me especially, I think the biggest thing that we've learned through COVID is communication is key to our residents. They understand the situation. It's not something anyone could have anticipated, but for us, communicating with them regularly and showing that we're here for our renters is the biggest push we've had in terms of our brand awareness and how we're sort of differentiating from competition. So we've been doing things like welfare calls. So all our property managers are going through our whole database and calling up every single resident, and just, it's not to say, you know, it's just to say, how are you? How are you getting on? What do you need from us? What do you want from us? We're here to help you. Is there anything we can do? And it's just really giving that one-to-one communication. As well as that, we've set up Facebook pages for all of our residents, which means that each development has its own Facebook page where neighbours can talk to each other. And what we've seen a lot of people doing is, if they're in isolation, someone's popped to get them some milk on their run and just dropped it on the Facebook page and said, I can drop it to your door, it's outside your door. And it's a really nice way for people to communicate, especially within these sort of like micro developments of, they're all part of Folio and they can talk as part of this Folio community and help each other, because there's only so much we can do from behind a computer screen. It comes with not only us helping our residents, but residents helping each other as well. So that's been like a massive thing that has got really good feedback, and everyone's been really appreciative of that. We've also sort of done some fun things around our Facebook pages. So we've run some social competitions where we've teamed up with Patch Plants as being like the prize, which obviously promotes like mental health, well-being and things like that. And there'll be competitions of like, okay, residents, send us your best expectation versus reality on your Jamie Oliver recipe that you've tried that's always been dusting in the cupboard. And like, we've had like so much engagement with those, or like best home workout that you've done, share it with us, and if we think yours is the best, then we'll give you a Patch Plants voucher. And the last campaign we did last week, which was really, really successful, was Folio Live. So lots of, I saw like lots of gym providers and stuff like this doing their own sort of live timetable of events within a week to help keep people sort of like engaged and part of this community. So we came up with the idea, especially because touching on what Lizzie said about lots of people losing their jobs or being furloughed and having a lot of time on their hands, and predominantly the build to rent market is sort of the creative types, the creative industry types, and quite often you work on like for yourself. So quite a lot of our residents have sort of face financial hardship. So we reached out to all our residents and we said, look, we're here to help. We've got a social and digital platform that's got a lot of followers. We are happy to give that over to you, and you can go on there, you can promote your business, you can do a workout class. If you're a personal trainer, a musician, whatever your job is, you can use our own platform to sort of advertise yourself. And we ran it last week and it was really successful. We had yoga, we had a magician, we had a guitarist, we had all these different people living in our developments that just came on and said, do you know what, I'd love to do that. I've got some beauty products and I'm really struggling at the moment to sell them and get an audience. And we said, that's fine, use our platform. They went live and we had all our residents joining in, and not only our residents but our staff as well. So I personally did the HIIT workout. It was actually quite hard, and we did that on last week, and that's been really great, like for residents and also for staff. It's something then when the PMs are picking up their phone calls saying, oh, did you do that HIIT workout last Thursday? It was really difficult, wasn't it? And it's that sense of community as a whole, not just us trying to always sell things, and we've actually got to be like proactive and here for our residents. So that's like the biggest things we've done, really, and that's what we'll be working on for the foreseeable. Okay,
Sophie, that's really great, and I think you make the point really well that one of the things I see in the last few weeks is a change in the sense of community being something we create or we try to impose on somebody through either facilities or the way we do things, to being genuinely something that's created by our residents themselves.
100%. Honestly, like I think quite often, especially in marketing, you try and guess what people want or what they need, and you'll be like, oh, I think that they'll do this, or we're going to target this because that's bound to be our target audience. And actually sometimes the best way to go about things is just to ask, just to say, look, what do you want from us? What can we do to help? And having these platforms like these calls that we're doing to our residents, having these Facebook pages, you can open up discussions and say, okay guys, like floor's open, what do you need? And that's where we've had the feedback of, oh, I'm struggling at the moment with like selling my business or doing this or doing that. And we go, okay, right, let's do a Folio Live campaign, let's help you out, what can we do? And I think just trying to put the ownership onto our residents is really important, rather than us telling them what to do, because I think that's like a big thing that happens quite a lot. And actually it's just to have a conversation and to have a chat and say, what do you want? Tell us and we can help. Like it's not always kind of doing what you think's best, because it's not always the way.
Can I put a slightly more challenging question, I hope,
love a challenge.
Which is about we're doing a lot. You've talked a lot about marketing and digital marketing, and Peter made some good comments about inquiries have risen up. What's the evidence we've seen so far about our ability, either individually yourselves or perhaps Sarah, yourself and Moda, as an industry, to actually convert inquiries into leads, and then actually I guess second after that, have we managed to do any move-ins given all the issues we have?
So last week we actually had 15 deals done, which is obviously quite a lot considering the current climate. I think at the start, when lockdown first kind of came in, it was a bit of a panic mode, everyone just kind of froze. And I think now we're sort of settled more into lockdown, people are looking for the future. I think at first it was very much into this whole like, okay, we don't really know what's going to happen in the next 2 weeks, let's just stay put. Now there's this shift, and I think people can see how things are going to change and that we're in this maybe for the long term. So if they do need to move within the next couple of months, they're starting to look now. So that's why I made the point about the fact our leads have not slowed down, but there is a real point on this conversion. So you have to talk to these residents well, there won't be residents yet, but hopefully there will be. But you have to talk to these leads a lot more. You have to work with them a lot more. It's a lot more hard work than before. It was literally, I want to move. Great, you've got that. It's the right price. Let's go. And it was honestly so fast paced in terms of our lettings. Now it's more sort of kind of showing what we've done. A massive point that we've done is we've done all of our properties. We've got virtual tours of, so we've used 360 tours, which is basically a viewing, but it's just done through the camera. And those have been essential into helping us secure deals at this time, because it means that people can basically have a viewing through a computer screen and they can really see what their apartment looks like. And luckily for us, like, photographers can get out there and do that sort of thing, because it's just a one-on-one job. So we've not struggled to get that. And those have really helped us in the conversions of getting people kind of through the door and getting them moved in. And then I guess for everything else, it's just keeping the leads warm and keeping them sort of aware of who we are and the brand. And then as and when they'll want to move, they will, and hopefully they'll come back to us because they'll see what we're doing. So in turn, all this community stuff that we're doing will in turn help our brand awareness, which will in turn help leads.
Okay, just a technical question: how many viewings are you having to do to convert to a lead into action? Is it a one-off? Are they doing directly agreed from the video viewing, or is there?
So it's pretty much as soon as someone comes and starts inquiring, we'll send out all the viewings straight away. So we're sending, because it's not technically a viewing, it's a 360 tour. That's being sent to nearly every single person that inquires. So there is a lot. But like I said, at the moment, I really it's not necessary. It's just timing, really, for these people, that people are waiting. And one of the incentives we've looked at, which has worked really well, which I think has led to the 15 conversions we've had in the past week, is 3 weeks is a big thing at the moment. It's like all in the news, as in, right, 3 weeks of the next lockdown period, 3 weeks is kind of in everyone's mind. So our incentive that we offered was 3 weeks rent free. So it was just kind of that repetition of the whole lockdown's going to be for 3 more weeks. Let's offer that 3 weeks rent free, which obviously does. We have like an incentive budget and things, so we've got that sort of side covered. And that 3 weeks rent free just means people have got a bit of leeway and they've got a bit of time. They feel like they've got 3 weeks to sort of settle, make sure that they can organise the move in, make it contactless, free, and all of that sort of thing. It just gives people that bit of reassurance that they don't have to start paying rent straight away. There's that bit of leeway, and I think that led to quite a lot of conversions last week.
And okay, we've got another question on about actual move-ins, and I'd love to come to Sarah on this, but I think, to be fair, I better go and talk to Will about his area, because it's great having this marketing, having these good buildings up there, but actually when we get back to the new normal or move out of lockdown, the first thing that's going to happen is a whole lot of construction sites are going to come back to life. What do you see happening there? What's happening now, and what do you foresee happening over the next 6 months, perhaps, Will?
Yeah, so I think we've probably been looking at a broad range of areas in terms of COVID-19 and BTR, and the first one being kind of the market, which I'll only touch on because we've explored that a bit already. But I think, as far as I say, I'd agree with what's been said so far. And I think if we look at, say, the BPF data from Q1 of this year, for example, showing that 40% increase in BTR units in planning in the UK regions, that's one indicator of the strength of momentum in the sector before this crisis set in. So I think recognising the short-term challenges, there's optimism that we would share for the longer term. I think secondly is obviously kind of around construction delivery of that pipeline, and particularly around supply chain. So in the BTR sector, in the UK, it's been a mixed picture around kind of site closures. So some were closed, some not. I think we're seeing that the majority are now moving towards reopening this week, or certainly relatively imminently. Obviously the crisis has created some challenges for the construction supply chain. So particularly around the need to social distance, obviously that can create challenges, physically working on sites. So there's been a need and a focus on reworking processes and methods and approaches to accommodate that so that they can be operated safely. There have also been some issues with material and plant availability, and that's partly a reflection of the fact that a lot of the materials factories and builders merchants also did close down for a while, but again they are reopening currently and going forward, so that we'd hope that would ease up. And then the other key issue really is financial fragility in the supply chain. So that's an issue that pre-existed before the COVID-19 crisis and actually has its roots going back to the financial crisis 2008 and since. But the COVID-19 crisis has of course kind of compounded those issues, particularly around cash flow, some of the unwelcome costs potentially that the supply chain are going to have to bear. And so, assurance around the financial health of the supply chain is also a really key focus in the sector at the moment. And then the last area really that we've been thinking about is also what the impact on the product might be, both in the short term because of social distancing, which has been touched on already, but also whether that will drive any longer term changes in what the customer demands or needs, and how that might shift the design and construction of BTR product. So for example, potentially an increased focus on hygiene generally in the way we kind of use buildings, and that might extend actually to how they're designed and constructed in terms of the materials and components that are used, but also in terms of kind of access, space, light, ventilation, and I think it was mentioned earlier, the crisis has of course shone a light on the importance of connectivity, so that will be even more important perhaps going forward.
Good. Well, I mean, look, there's so many topics there that I want to talk about. Perhaps I could pick up on first on the construction side of stuff, because it's an area that doesn't seem to me to get enough attention.
Sure.
At the minute, I hear lots of people talking about everything being nice, all they've been investors and the developers and the constructors all saying, how can we work together to get back on site and get things working well? And lots of reference to force majeure and saying, look, we won't worry about penalties. Do you see that continuing, or do you see some crunch points happening in the next few months?
I think there's always a potential for crunch points, but I think my view would be that there has been a sort of notable consensus across the industry generally actually around the importance of collaboration and working together, open and honest engagement, and in some ways a recognition quite broadly that will be the only way that actually we'll get through this. And I think it is important because we do need to learn from past crises or downward parts of the cycle, the 2008 crisis being an obvious one where the industry generally did lose capacity because of some of the behaviours that were kind of adopted. So I think there is, as I say, a broad recognition in the industry that we want to avoid that. We want to try and retain and maintain the capacity and capability that we have. And of course, for sectors like build to rent, where there is, it feels likely that there could be further significant growth in investment, that's really important. So that the supply chain is there to deliver the projects that we want to deliver.
Okay, no, I think that accords with my hope, certainly, that we maintain a spirit of cooperation. Maybe I'm slightly more cynical than you, but I do worry about situations in a few months' time when we start to see contractors realising they don't have the capacity to deliver to meet the development agreements and stuff they've agreed. And
I think there's certainly, you're absolutely right. I mean, I think there certainly are going to be some challenges around that. And I mean, one issue on the social distancing is that even though sites may be reopening, the fact they have to operate differently but to accommodate that safely does mean that productivity, for example, is probably going to be reduced. But again, there are some very, very proactive initiatives throughout the supply chain, all levels, looking at how that challenge can be worked around. And, I think, as I say, there are likely to be some areas of challenge and disagreement, but overall, the trend at the moment seems to be towards collaboration.
That's great, absolutely. And I think speaking on the issue of collaboration, if I can perhaps switch back to a broader commercial issue, which Stephanie Smith's raised about collection on rents. Two questions really, I think, for Lizzie and Sarah. One is what's your collection experience been so far, and what measures are you taking to soften the effect for people who are suffering hardship? Yeah, Lizzie, fine. Let's go to you first.
Yeah, so it's actually quite hard for us because our rents are due on the 1st of each month. So really the month that was the most, sort of waiting on tenterhooks really to see how we were performing was for the 1st of April, because obviously it wasn't until mid-March that actually this situation kind of really kicked off. So we were assuming that all of our rent payers paid as normal as at the 1st of March, and we were left with kind of genuine arrears that we've had perhaps longer term. In March we were affected by the court closures and the sort of immediate ban on eviction. So we actually had quite a few cases scheduled for the end of March for people who were in very high arrears, and actually we've not been able to pursue those cases. So that sort of contributed to a slight increase in current tenant arrears in March, because we weren't, arguably you move the the debt just becomes bad debt once you've gained possession of your property again. So that was a sort of small effect in March, and then obviously we all of our rent debits get applied as at the 1st of April, and we've been monitoring very closely week on week since that point to sort of assess where we are. We've got about 3,000 properties. We've had about 200 people that we've recorded contact us to state that they are having financial difficulties. Our stance on that is quite brutally that rent is due. However, we have been signposting people, and we've been giving people lots and lots of information in terms of the help and support that they can get via their local borough. We have been, in some cases, we've been applying kind of some rent holidays and agreeing how that money will be paid back at a later date. We saw out of the 200 people that contacted us to state that they were having issues. I'm doing this off the top of my head, I haven't got the numbers in front of me, but I think we had about 40 of those people paid us then in full. About 60 people paid us a share of the rent that they would ordinarily be due, and the other 100 remained unpaid. So as at the beginning of this week, in the last stat, so our rent arrears are typically about 1.5% of our gross annualised rent, and as at the end of last week, our rent arrears were about 2.7. So we are we're quite heavily impacted on this, and it's not just the situation now, but it's the situation going forward, and it's about how we deal with these arrears cases in the future. How we, when the courts do decide to reopen, they're going to be absolutely swamped with cases. That process is then going to be really slow, and courts do get their backlogs anyway. So sometimes the time it takes for you to progress something into court, to be able to get possession, to be able to sort your money judgments, that can take quite a long time ordinarily. My fear is that actually the waiting times at the end of this are also going to be huge. So we're trying to manage it very, very carefully. We're trying to deal with people on a case-by-case basis. I personally don't like sort of putting people in buckets and trying to deal with people on a bulk basis. So we're trying to deal with people's individual situations, and we are trying to work with people. We don't, whilst our sort of stance has been that rent is due in line with your agreement, and we're not an operator who's offered sort of bulk discounts, and I know some operators have. We're we are trying to work with people, and we're trying to be sympathetic. We're trying to come to arrangements where we are, we're helping everybody where we can. But that being said, you know, it does have a big impact on the business. We're an investment portfolio. You know, we make money by bringing in the rental income, and we offer services back, you know, are paid out of that rental income. So we are looking at it really, really closely at the moment. It's not necessarily the impact now, although we can see that there is a big impact, but it's also about how we kind of rectify this going forward, and actually how long is that going to take, and what, you know, in 6 months time, actually what is our position going to be versus, you know, 12 months time. It's really quite hard. I've got some of this data, so if people do want to have a look at our data, I'm happy to kind of share whatever needs to be shared. We're sort of growing it week by week, and we're trying to build some trends and analysis out of it, but it is really, really hard.
Okay, thank you very much, Lizzie. Sarah, sorry, I would like to go to you, but we're actually really out of time now. But I think so far that's been a great debate, some great answers. Peter, thank you for raising a whole lot of really interesting topics that we could speak for hours on. I have got 3 questions that haven't been answered yet. We'll try and provide answers to those by email. And if I can just finish off by saying 2 things. One is picking up on Lizzie's point about data. We're in dialogue with the government through the BPF on the impact and the thoughts on rent collection. I think it's going to be a crucial piece of information as to both helping the government understand the quality of the build-to-rent sector and why it is, and investors, why it's a better investment class and opportunity than perhaps other sectors. And we're encouraging members to share that data with us. We aggregate it and anonymize it so that it's available as a sector piece of information. But that's me. Another plug for the UKAA. If you enjoyed this, then do join our other webinars. There's lots of them on our website, www.ukaa.org.uk/events. At which point it only really leaves me to say thank you to all our panelists, Peter, to Sarah, and apologies, Sarah, for not the time to come back to you, to Lizzie, to Will, and to Sophie. I'd echo one of the comments that we saw. What a great presentation on marketing ideas. Lots and lots of really exciting things there. And again, Sarah, I should apologise because I know Mard at Moda are fantastic marketeers as well. So just shows there's a lot going on. It's a lot of thoughts, a lot of positivity. I hope you've enjoyed the session. And finally, just say thank you to all of you who've joined us. We've got 90 odd people on board now. I know we've had up to 110, which is great attendance. Thank you once again. Thank you, Love to Rent, for prompting us to do this, and look forward to talking to everybody soon. Cheerio. Bye.